Good afternoon. I'll call this special meeting, Stratford City Council, to order. I will begin this afternoon's meeting. Joining me in the council chamber is Joan Thompson, our Chief Administrative Officer, our City Clerk, Tachana Defo, and our Deputy City Clerk, Chris Bantock. Members of council have joined us. We do have regrets from Councillor Ingram due to a death in her family. At this point in time, are there any declarations of peculiar interest from members of council? Seeing none, we'll move to the adoption of the addenda that has been circulated for today's meeting. Would someone move adoption of the addenda? Councillor Ritzman, Councillor Burback. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? And that's carried. We had a number of, item 4, receipt of correspondence and hearing of delegations. There are a number of delegations that wrote to council, and they are listed on page 2, 3, and 4, and they are note, and all members of council have been provided that information as well. Under item 4.2, there are delegations scheduled for this afternoon, and I will turn it over to the clerk to invite the delegations in with regard to that. And before we do that, though, I'd like to invite forward the Chief Administrative Officer, Joan Thompson, to just give an overview before we begin. Ms. Thompson.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor Matheson and members of council. So council is considering a cost sharing arrangement for external services, that being the water, sewer, road improvements for the proposed development of the site for a float glass facility. The cost sharing document has been posted on our website. There has been a revision made to it, so the revised cost sharing arrangement has been included with your addenda. The percentages set out in that cost sharing document are the guidelines for this project. And for example, and I just wanted to point out that the change with the revised document relates to the Perth Line 29 improvements. And the 75% for the city's cost acknowledges that 75% is the city cost, and this represents the benefit of the Line 29 improvements to the city and the existing businesses. And for example, Durkin Street and Wright Boulevard do feed into Line 29, and so this represents that benefit cost to the city for those. So, Your Worship, that is my opening comments.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. I'll now turn it over to the clerk to invite in our first presentation. Councillor Sebin, sorry.
Sorry, thank you. I just wanted to comment before we start that I understand there's a time limit. I just wanted to, I know that there will be some flexibility. I just wanted to comment that if somebody's running a bit over that, I'm okay with that going over, but I just wanted to comment on that. So.
Yes, thanks, Councillor Sebin. Now, note it, and we will take that into consideration. Thank you. I'll turn it over then to the clerk, and if I'd ask members that aren't speaking to mute their microphones so the clarity of the presentation can come through. All right, Chris Goujon is our first presenter. Chris, Mr. Goujon.
Good evening. Good evening, Mayor, councillors, and fellow citizens of Stratford. My name is Chris Goujon, retired firefighter in my 11th year living in Stratford. During my presentation, I will be stating facts only, no opinions. After stating these facts, I would like to have a few questions for the mayor and council, as well as one for the glass company's owner. Fact: Bob Rae, ambassador to the United Nations, stated just yesterday, and I quote, "There's no question that there's aspects of what the Chinese are doing to the Uyghurs that fits into the definition of genocide." Fact: At the present, the federal government is reviewing the immigration policies to accommodate the anticipated influx of refugees from Hong Kong due to further crackdowns. Fact: China's ambassador to Canada recently made veiled threats to Canada should we aid any pro-democracy refugees. Fact: The two Michaels Kurvig and Spavor have been held in solitary confinement since 2018, a direct result to the arrest of Meng Wanzhou of Huawei, a violation of Canadian law. Fact: Xinyi Li, owner of the glass companies, net worth at last count was $38 billion US. He has 7 factories in mainland China. Mr. Li's son is married to the daughter of Zhang Guoli. Zhang Guoli is the former vice premier of China and a member of the Standing Politburo Committee, whose members include 7 to 11 of China's most powerful Communist Party members. Zhang Guoli undersaw the installation of the Three Gorges Dam and forced the displacement of 2.2 million people. He was also the architect of the One Belt, One Road project, a $1.6 trillion investment of loans to third world countries, which has since been deemed neo-colonialism by the President of Indonesia. Before you discount or doubt any family or Communist Party connections, I will give you 2 more facts. Mr. Li's glass company stock rose 4.5% on the day of his son's marriage to the vice premier's daughter. That same son now sits on the board of directors of 17 different companies. Now I have a couple of questions. First, for Mr. Li and/or his representative. Does Mr. Li, employer of 13,000 Chinese people with headquarters in Hong Kong, support democracy? And to council, I would ask this. Given that the mayor and council passed a motion declaring a 155-year-old symbol in the form of the Confederate flag to represent hate speech and oppression, how, in good conscience, obvious virtue, and prior knowledge can council even consider dealing with a company with ties to the Communist Party elite? And being from China, a present-day regime right now that has a documented history of human rights abuses and oppressions of free speech and religion, anti-democratic crackdowns in Hong Kong, and murder of its own people in Tiananmen Square. Does money, any amount of money, no matter how large, come before Canadian values? Thank you for your time. Hello? Hello?
Thank you. Our next presenter is Jamie Gibb. Mr. Gibb.
Good afternoon, Chair, Mayor Matheson, and Stratford councillors. My name is Jamie Gibb from 4145 line 29 RR3. I'm going to make 2 requests today. One will be a request that is of technical nature, and a second from a presentation of personal nature. In reviewing the cost sharing agreement information attached to the agenda, it is unclear how all of the figures relating to the city's responsibility under the cost sharing were arrived at. In the absence of such information, it is impossible to determine whether or not the cost sharing is reasonable. From the information provided, it can only be assumed that the city is paying its proportionate share of the infrastructure based on the total servicing capacity to be created minus the servicing capacity allocated to or the responsibility of Xinyi. It would appear that any servicing capacity that is proposed to be the responsibility of the City of Stratford is intended to service the annexation lands not used for the Xinyi glass plant. These lands have yet to be designated in the City of Stratford official plan for any use, let alone urban development. Until a designation for these lands is established in the city's official plan, the designation of agricultural under the provisions of the Township of Perth South official plan continue to apply. As a result, any expenditure on infrastructure to service the non-Xinyi annexation lands is premature and inappropriately presupposes the future determination of the direction for future expansion to Stratford urban area that is required by the provincial policy statement to only be considered as part of a comprehensive review process. The proposed expenditure on infrastructure to service these lands also would appear to potentially conflict with Section 24, subsection 1 of the Planning Act, which prohibits the City of Stratford from undertaking of public works that do not conform with the City of Stratford official plan. My first request is that you observe this requirement and defer the vote on cost sharing. On one slide from the GSP presentation was depicted a conceptual aerial view of the proposed factory. The shimmering new factory stands alone. Both my farm and neighboring farms appear in the backdrop. The Rate Business Park lies in the distance to the north. It's a picture creating some ideal of an agrarian utopia and industrial utopia in coexistence. On my farm, both woodlots have been enhanced to be their fullest, greenest, best versions of themselves. However, removed from the schematic has been any trace of our home and farmstead. My sister in Waterloo texted in the question, asking, why were the Gibb and Van Ness homes absent from the landscape? Chris Pigeon paused and replied, artistic rendering. The irony of the removal of the human element from this picture reflects the removal of the human element from the needed public participation process of this proposal is obvious. My second request to you is simple. Allow the people you represent time to educate themselves and to participate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gibb. Our next presentation will be made by Dorothy Van Eesbroek.
Chair Matheson, am I on?
Yes, you are, Ms. Van Eesbroek.
Thank you, Mayor Matheson and councillors. I appreciate the opportunity to speak today. I attended all of the annexation meetings, and I appreciate the difficult decision council has had. I appreciated the opportunity to participate in Xinyi Glass information meeting on Saturday. At the meeting, it was reported that Xinyi would give council a report on that meeting. I would just like it noted that the meeting was not accessible to anyone with internet, vision, hearing, or memory issues. Will council be making the report that they were given or a recording of the meeting available to the public to make it more accessible?
Ms.
No
Van Eesbroek,
comment?
if you would like to move on, I'll endeavor to get an answer to that.
Okay. One of the slides from the meeting said, Xinyi would pay its fair share of the infrastructure costs with other users. Who are these other users? Xinyi only takes an L-shaped lot of the annexed land. Will there be other users? Do we know this? Will it be in 1 or 10 years? Are there any studies done on the possible negative impact of this on any agri-food businesses? I also wondered, in the developmental costs, are any of the city's annexation fees, legal fees, or report fees included in developmental costs? Should the pandemic increase these costs or timelines, how will that affect it? Just in closing, Planning is a public process, and in my opinion, it is the public process should only be overridden by the minister when there are little or no public concerns, and when there are no land use planning or related concerns, and the matter is urgent. I don't believe this matter fulfills those tests. In Barrie, a councillor asked, when speaking to ministry officials, was told that Minister Clark would not approve an MZO if the involved municipalities did not agree. Is there a document that says council or the city requested the MZO, and will the city make this public? Thank you.
Thank you. And I did ask the clerk, and that presentation was provided to us that was shared on Saturday and will be uploaded to the city's website after this meeting. Our next president is Dr. Colin Simmons. Dr. Simmons.
Hi, can you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
Thank you very much to Mayor and Council for allowing me to speak today. I'm strongly opposed to the current proposal. The main reasons why I'm strongly opposed are I attended the information session from Xinyi on the weekend and specifically asked what the greenhouse gas emissions were for this proposed plant. Now, many other specific technical details were available as these were roadblocks in previous attempts. So the water consumption, the traffic usage, the decibel levels of the factory were all on display, but the CO2 emission equivalents in ton per year were not available. I can assume this is an intentional omission because these CO2 emissions and the equivalents will be significant. I'm not a industrial engineer, so I do not have even a magnitude to guess, but this may equal all of Stratford's CO2 emissions as they are currently. Now, I was heartened to see that Stratford declared a climate emergency earlier this year, although it does seem like a long time ago, and allowing a company to construct a massive natural gas furnace that will need to burn continuously for up to 15 years with no documentation of the magnitude of these emissions in the planning phase is a glaring omission. 2020 has seen climate change driven events already. 2020 is on track to be the warmest year in documented history, with all the top 10 years occurring since the year 2000. If you can recall, Australia and California had unprecedented wildfires, and the Atlantic hurricane season has the most named storms in the entire history of naming storms. And currently, the latest Category 5 hurricane is barreling into Nicaragua. Now, I'm not opposed to a glass plant being constructed in Stratford, but I am opposed to the current glass plant proposal, namely because there has not been documentation of these greenhouse gas emissions. The proposal, which could use electric heat as the source, because this is the plan's proposed backup. So electric furnaces could be used, but have not been selected because it is probably financially advantageous for the company to use natural gas, which is currently cheap and available, when electric heat is their backup. So electric heat should be used as the main heat source. I am also opposed to this glass plant because it avoids the necessary community input by using the blanket ministerial zoning order to subvert the typical process of community engagement. I also oppose this proposal because it is being rushed through in meetings scheduled, such as this one, in short time frame via technology, which decreases the engagement of any part of the population that is not financially or technologically savvy to engage. The typical council attendees are unlikely to attend meetings such as this, and it allows the council to pass whatever they want without the typical community engagement. So I'm the fourth speaker in your series of speakers tonight. and each speaker has brought up a different, totally viable point as to why this proposal should not proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Simmons. Our next speaker is Gail Robbins.
Hello? Can you
Hello?
hear me?
Yes, we
Okay. Okay. Good evening. My name is Gail Robbins. I'd like to say I'm a lifelong resident of Stratford. I've been at all the meetings from the annex lands. I've been questioning this factory. And part of that reason is because I'm very much environmentally concerned that I see glaring out here. One of the questions that I asked, and I was very specific, was about prevailing winds from the 300 stack for the droplets. When I asked that at this last meeting that they had, it was conveniently said that the lady did not have that information with her. She didn't bring it. I find that to be extraordinary that a company that is doing what it's doing wouldn't have all information at its fingertips, that they wouldn't think that someone who lives in this community would be asking about that. I'm very concerned about the water usage. I remember as a child that we did water every second day. There were things that happened. We can stand here and say that our water is infinite, but you know, stuff happens. And there's countries that would give gold for the water that we have. And here we want to throw it away to a company that we're going to guarantee water usage for 12 to 15 years over their tax-paying citizens. And that's wrong. That sounds like a communist idea. Company comes first, the citizen comes second. And that is not how Stratford should work. We're the proud festival city, and putting this factory and its pollutants in our air goes against everything that citizens here believe in. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Robbins. Our next speaker is Mr. Mike Sullivan.
Hello.
Hi, good afternoon.
My name is Mike Sullivan.
Yes, it is.
And this was very confusing, but I'll start again. Mayor Matheson, members of council, thanks for the opportunity. I'm here with GetConcernedStratford.ca, a local organization trying to get the facts and to protect Stratford's environment. Firstly, my concern is with the hugely undemocratic way this is being done. I don't know if this was the town of Stratford who asked the Ford government to issue a ministerial zoning order, but that's what we find ourselves with. The MZO eliminates the chance for the public to be involved in the decisions about the zoning of the land and the uses it might be put to. The order was so specific as to limit the use of the land to a glass factory and no other use. It stinks. Maybe south of the border, democracy is under attack, but I thought here in Canada we were safe. As a result, I have to ask, I don't like doing this, but I have to ask if anyone on council received any gratuity or favor or emolument from the proponent. Second, I'm concerned about the attempts to characterize Xinyi as a Hong Kong company. Their factories are all in mainland China, and the only business listing they have, so that they can be on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, shows them as a Cayman Islands company, not a Hong Kong company. Third, I'm concerned about the attempt to build housing for Chinese workers at the factory. In the application to Guelph, it was called a dormitory. Here, it's being called an emergency preparedness center with up to 50 employees living there full time. I doubt very much that Bruce Nuclear has 50 employees living on site full time for emergencies. Xinyi's business practice from their website is to house their workforce at the factories themselves. Perhaps that works in China. It is not the practice here, nor should it be. When Kathleen Wynne signed the agreement with Xinyi in 2017, the plan mentioned 450 skilled jobs. That has now dwindled to 320. And the town of Guelph was told that initially all the jobs would be imported Chinese workers, to be possibly changed to local hires as time wore on. Guelph was also told that all the equipment would be sourced from China and instructions would all be in Mandarin. Now, it is one thing to train a local workforce to take the factory over time. It's quite another to make all that training only in Mandarin. Promised local jobs will be exceedingly rare if that's the case. The suggestion that these jobs will be so technical and so specialized that only the imported Chinese labor can do them is also suspect. Probably about 1/3 of the jobs will be actually running the glass float line. The rest are warehousing, shipping and receiving, moving and packing finished products. How they can suggest those jobs can't be performed by any current Canadian labor force beggars belief. Concerns been raised by our local MP about labor standards and unionization at the factory. Will Xinyi abide by Ontario labor laws limiting hours of work? Will those 50 workers trapped in the dormitory get paid while they're there? Xinyi has a checkered labor history. A strike at one of their factories in 2014 was quashed by Chinese police forces. The reporter who wrote about it suggested it was the owner's close relationship with the Chinese Communist Party that got quick action from police, who don't normally get involved in strikes in China. The issue was Chinese labor laws, and as far as I know, the employees did not get what they were owed. Fourth, as many others have indicated, I'm concerned with the environmental impact this project will have on the community. The actual air quality report is missing. The City of Stratford doesn't have it. And the amount of water the project will use is significant and deserving further study. Why was another site with its own surface water source not considered? What will happen if the particulate and other scrubbers in the air exhaust system fail? Will the plant shut down while it's repaired? And what will be the impact of the final shutdown of the plant? Who will be responsible for the cleanup once Xinyi is gone? It's clear that there might have been economic benefits to the town of Stratford, but without guarantees of jobs and answers to many of the above questions, the benefits are just not there. I hope and ask that the City of Stratford push pause on this application while the residents of Stratford have the time and the ability to have a much more involved local concerned citizen involvement. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The next presenter is Ms. Eleanor Klein. Okay. Ms. Kane has been disconnected. We will connect her back in. We'll go to Patrick O'Rourke now. Mr. O'Rourke. Mr. O'Rourke. Okay. Is pardon me. Mr. O'Rourke, you need to unmute yourself. Okay. Melissa Verspeten, if you could, we'll let Ms. Verspeten in and we'll connect Ms. Kane, and Mr. O'Rourke can unmute himself when we call on him again.
Hello.
Good afternoon.
Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, you are. Go ahead.
Perfect. Good evening. Thank you for allowing me the time to speak today. I've spoken to so many local residents in the last week, their emotions ranging from anger to frustration to fear and bewilderment. How could the council we've elected to look out for our best interests feel that pushing this proposal through by way of an MZO during a global pandemic was fair to the constituents that they've sworn to represent? I'm not going to use my time today to speak about the many health-related concerns pertaining to water and air quality contamination that so many of us have expressed, as I'm sure others will speak to that. I know that everyone on council has families, children, grandchildren that will consume the water and breathe the air for generations to come, and I do very much think that further information is needed. However, because of the rush with which this is being pushed through and the utter lack of transparency to the public, I'm going to speak instead on the process and how it's been conducted. First and foremost, pertaining to the MZO, the document as issued contains a great number of details extremely specific to Xinyi Glass. My first question to council is, who submitted this application and who was involved in advising how that application was to be filled out when it went to the provincial government? I've been in contact with Aaron O'Toole, the Conservative Party leader of Canada. Mr. O'Toole spoke just yesterday about how Canada needs to take a harder stance on its dealings with China. We have Canadian citizens being wrongfully detained in conditions that violate their human rights, and Stratford has willingly made business dealings with a privately held company that has ties to the Communist Party of China. This is so much larger than a Stratford issue. This is a Canada issue, and those calls are being made as to why this particular deal has been allowed to happen and why it has specifically by way of the minister's zoning order. Someone will need to answer to that. As far as the cost sharing agreement that was released just Friday, when this proposal went to Guelph-Aramosa Township, there was no cost sharing. Xinyi was to pay for the entire cost of development. Why are our taxpayers being asked to contribute nearly $6 million? And why has there been only a weekend between the release of the cost sharing documents and the requirement for public comments to be submitted? Our country, our province, and our city are on the brink of a second wave of COVID-19. There's a very high probability that we will soon find ourselves in some form of lockdown. If the city is insistent on spending $6 million on economic issues, why not put that $6 million into a reserve fund to aid the local businesses that are already struggling or underwater because of this pandemic? Instead of committing this money to a multinational company privately held by a Chinese billionaire, why not instead commit that money to reserves to save the businesses of our neighbors, our families, and our friends? Many of those businesses have been here for decades, and these inevitable hard times to come could very conceivably put them completely out of business. By allowing this $6 million to be spent on infrastructure for this factory, you're prioritizing that over the constituent business owners of this city, the people that you see every single day. How can you, in good conscience, think that's the best decision? If council has done a fantastic job of the research and we're all completely safe and in good hands, then make all of the information available to the public and let this project stand on its merit rather than what appears from everyone who's looking at it from the outside as a very hush and rush job to pull one over on the community. What harm is there in deferring to allow people to fully understand all of the details of this very complex decision? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Verspieten. Ms. Kane?
Hello, Your Worship, Mayor Matheson, and members of Stratford City Council. You have received my email of yesterday. However, as of 4 o'clock today, it appears that the possibility of Stratford citizens having any input into decision-making around the Xinyi gas plant is virtually impossible. Many are scrambling to understand and then respond to what appears to be a done deal. Watching the November 14th Xinyi online presentation led by Chris Pigeon, it became clear that advancing this project to Stratford after Guelph, Iramosa, and London had turned it down has become a priority for the City of Stratford. The array of consultation reports on all aspects of the project would have been undertaken at least 2 years ago, suggesting that our city has jumped on the Xinyi bandwagon a few years ago, making it clear that a majority of our municipal politicians see no need for consultation. I have lived in Stratford for over 40 years. I have been widely engaged in the community at several levels. I have never witnessed such a colossal disregard for public process. City Council members did not have access to Pigeon's online report until the end of that session. Why? Public consultation was announced a mere 15 days ago. There was scant mention of plans to partner with Xinyi in the August 4th Beacon Herald article. Clearly, the train had already left the station. Required the provincial zoning changes to the proposed site had already been finalized. With the threat of climate collapse within 10 years hanging over our civilization, nations, cities, municipalities, villages have a profound responsibility to dial back, to ask the tough questions, to listen to the experts, to consult with populations. Air quality, water aquifer safety, preservation of farmland all seem to be at threat here. How will you protect these vital resources for our region? The massive increase in truck traffic and pollutants is a sure bet and contradicts the city's own climate emergency declaration of February 2020. The Ontario government is hell-bent to diminish the powers of regional conservation authorities and municipal land zoning by means of MZO, Municipal Zoning Order. The Xinyi gas plant project is completely out of scale for a community of our size. Councillor Bonnie Henderson kindly provided a list of 15 technical reports that total 1,295 pages. I received it at 2:30 this afternoon and have not managed to even open one of them. I have read, listened, debated, and now submit this plea that you, City Council, slow down the engine, allow a more inclusive public feedback process that would reflect a greater degree of respect for your constituencies. However, it may be too late. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kane. Mr. O'Rourke. Emily Chandler, if she's available, we'll go to her and we'll come back to Mr. O'Rourke.
Good evening, Mayor, councillors, and city staff. You can hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. I am Emily Chandler, and I am chair of the City of Stratford's Energy and Environment Committee. The mandate of this council-appointed committee is to study all matters coming to its attention, which might have any effect on the environment, particularly the environment of the City of Stratford and its surroundings. The Xinyi Canada Glass Limited project concerns me on 3 fronts in particular: water use and its impact on climate change, ecological impact, and transparency. Over a year ago, Xinyi expressed our concerns particularly regarding water use and requested more information about this plant. I want to be clear that tonight I'm speaking as a citizen myself and not on behalf of the committee, due to the fact that no information was made available to us until Thursday, November 12th. It's true that Stratford is quote unquote water rich. Its needs are met via the 12 municipal wells that draw groundwater from a deep bedrock aquifer. The Xinyi Canada project's water use is estimated at just under 1 million cubic meters per year. Currently, Stratford uses 3.6 million cubic meters on an annual basis. Therefore, Xinyi Canada's plant will increase our overall use by 1/3 of current total levels. Given the plant's significant water use, in my opinion, much more assessment and consultation is necessary. As per the environmental impact study, there is a small wooded wetland, a water course called the Hislop Drain, a species of special concern, and woodland. All of these would be impacted if not entirely removed by this project. I want to point out that we are currently below Environment Canada's recommended 6% wetland coverage as outlined in Upper Thames River Conservation Authority's 2017 Watershed Report Card. These impacts will be mitigated via Upper Thames recommendations if they are followed. However, continual chipping away at these natural features time and time again greatly degrades our environmental quality. The Minister's zoning order was made based on the request of the City of Stratford, Township of Perth South, and County of Perth. Notice was posted on the Environmental Registry, but MZOs are made to make regular public consultation not required. With all due respect, this seems very much in line with the current provincial government's MO of being pro-development, regardless of the environmental and social context. Considering the scope of this project, the lack of transparency is extremely concerning, and I have to question why. What did council know and when? Why did the city request the MZO that eliminated processes of public consultation, only releasing information to the public days before signing a development agreement and well over a year into the planning process? As mentioned earlier, in February of 2020, the city declared a climate emergency and is currently in the process of preparing a climate action plan. As mentioned before, the impact this plant has on the city's GHG emissions is unknown. And what is the value of a climate action plan if projects such as these are not considered within the context of the climate emergency? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chandler. Patrick O'Rourke.
I don't know what the fuck to do now.
You're on, Mr. O'Rourke. Mr. O'Rourke, hello? Mr. O'Rourke?
Here you are. Hello?
Mr. O'Rourke, you are live.
Oh, thank you. I'm not quite sure what happened, but thank you for this opportunity. I fully support Stratford broadening its economic base, particularly now with COVID-19 and the potential issues with the theater. In this case, I'm concerned with the absence of accurate and adequate information that have been available to the public and the lack of transparency in the process that led us to here. According to news reports, the company proposal turned down in Guelph, Hermosa in 2018 was for a 2 million square foot plant costing $450 million, using 1,600 cubic meters of water and creating 400 jobs. According to the city website, which kind of reads like a promotional brochure for the project, the proposal was a 1 million square foot building costing $400 million, using 2,500 cubic meters and creating 3,800 jobs. I have trouble understanding how a plant that is half the size and costs nearly 90% as much, use over 50% more water, and create 95% as many jobs. Math just doesn't work. And the increased water usage is particularly odd, given the website says the majority of water will be recycled. Website says there will be 380 new jobs. And these will be a mix of technical and others. But it does not indicate how many of each type, what skills would be needed, or when in fact those jobs would appear. Website refers to non-Canadian based workers and companies being subject to federal rules, which of course they are. It does not say how many such workers are planned. Is it 5, 50, 150? It matters. Website also says the plant will use advanced technology and advanced management systems to meet air quality and other environmental standards. It doesn't say what these technologies are, or even whether this is existing technology that will be applied, or whether we're hoping that there will be technology developed in the future to meet these standards. Overall, the statements on the website obviously reflect a proposal provided by the company and other technical information. But to my knowledge, except to the extent this information was made available by the company on Saturday, the public has no idea what the proposal says, what the scientific or technical reports say. Similarly, the cost sharing estimates could not have been prepared without information related to site location, access, a host of other matters. But that information is nowhere to be found online. Perhaps in the information provided by the company, but it's unclear. The Guelph-Hermosa proposal apparently sought a 7-story building with a very tall smokestack above that. Is that what's being proposed here? A 7-story structure in the outskirts of town? Regarding the process, I feel like I and other citizens of Stratford are essentially being presented with a fait accompli, a done deal. But there's no reason for that. This process has been ongoing for some time. London Free Press and other media reported in July 2019 that the city had made a proposal to the company. There were other subsequent reports. But yet, the city's proposal to the company has not been made public, nor is there any analysis of the material presented as to how this final deal compares with what the city proposed. Did the city get what it was asking for? Did it have to pay more? We don't know. In particular, I question whether the city offered to pay nearly half the development costs. If so, I simply don't understand why. The city would have gone into these negotiations with a strong hand. The company had been rejected in Guelph-Hermosa, rejected or at best got a lukewarm response in the London area. No one seemed to want them. Most of the benefits, at least in the short term, or the development, benefits the company, not the taxpayers. The company should pay certainly more than 57% costs. I have a final question. City website and some of the discussion I've heard gives the impression that the minister's order rezoning the lands just sort of fell from the sky, as if the minister was sitting around in his office one afternoon, kind of bored, and thought, I know what I'll do. I'll rezone a bunch of farmland outside of Stratford for a glass plant. It's pretty obvious that things don't happen that way. The order was in response to a request, maybe from the company to avoid another Hermosa situation, maybe from the city to avoid having to go through the public rezoning process, and maybe both mutually. In any event, I think the public needs to know how that order came to be. And if the city requested it, or the company requested it, or if it was in fact part of the arrangement between the city and the company. And I would just simply join other people who said, all of this is too much, too quickly, without anywhere near enough public participation or even transparency in the process. Council should defer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rourke. The next speaker is Augusta Dwyer.
Hello. I want to thank the mayor and council.
Ms. Dwyer, could you please
Yes.
mute your computer while you're speaking so that we don't get feedback?
Is that better?
That's perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, thank you for giving us an opportunity to speak, although I do wish that we would have had more information about what was happening with the Xinyi project in the previous years. I was surprised on Saturday when I attended the online information session that how many years ago that the environmental studies and so on were done. My main preoccupation is the traffic. The session on Saturday told us that we could expect to see a transport truck every 7.5 minutes going into or out of the plant. And this would be coming along a 2-lane highway. And so I think the potential for traffic jams, trucks idling, and increasing the environmental impact of this plant, and also, of course, traffic accidents, I think is going to be a huge problem in the future, especially if the amount of production increases. And I think if this plant is going to be providing its products throughout Canada and also to the United States, there's a very good chance of those 50 trucks being insufficient to move all of the products that they would be selling in Canada and the United States. So I think this is a problem, and in many ways emblematic of how incongruous it seems to me the idea is of having this gigantic plant on farmland outside of our city. It's a city where I was born. I grew up in Logan Township, and I moved back here 5 years ago, and I'm extremely proud and happy to live in such a beautiful city with such great cultural industries. And I also appreciate the other industries that are working and existing in Stratford. So I don't have a problem with people trying to find more industries, but I do feel that Xinyi should be somewhere else. It's a $2 billion market cap company from my research this morning. And so I kind of wonder, $400 million is not a huge investment for them. I honestly can't help but wonder if this company has turned down the possibility of establishing itself in existing industrial parks or industrial zones where there is already infrastructure, including road infrastructure, with the idea that it is cheaper for it to establish itself in Stratford, taking advantage of Stratford in some sense, rather than being in an industrial zone, using area that's already, got factories and so on around it. So that's basically, those are my concerns. I don't know if there's some way that council can give us better information on the traffic implications of these trucks coming up Highway 7 every 7.5 minutes. That is extremely worrying, I think. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Dwyer. Sharon Collingwood is our next speaker. Ms. Collingwood, good afternoon.
Testing. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, good. Well, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm here to object to the undemocratic way this project has been rushed through by council. In a time of pandemic, when people have so many other worries to attend to, our city council's first thought should be the inclusion of citizens. At the very least, consideration should be given to Councillor Ingram, whose grandfather has just passed away from COVID at Cedarcroft. Councillor Ingram opposes this project, but could not attend the meeting. My question at the Xinyi presentation on Saturday was not answered, among others. I'm repeating it now to illustrate the confusion and possible deception that surrounds this project. My question regards the 3-story Emergency Preparedness Center. When the Xinyi project was first proposed to the council in Guelph, Hermosa, it was called a dormitory, contained 50 units, and was for temporary accommodation of foreign workers. There were also additional dwelling units planned, a cafeteria and a gym. In the present version of the project, the dormitory has magically become a preparedness center, with 50 employees standing by to deal with operational emergencies like electrical outages. So my question to Xinyi and to the council is, which is it? Either it's an emergency space in which 50 workers are on standby for something to happen, or it's simply a residence for skilled workers. The difference is important as we're talking about 2 different kinds of workers with different backgrounds and language learning abilities. Will language play a role in creating a ghetto of workers isolated from the general community and subject to company pressure and control? What will be the repercussions of an isolated population of unilingual Mandarin speakers whose first loyalty is to their company? Are there workplace abuses that will be overlooked? Are there social issues to be dealt with? Have there been any studies at all to determine how such workers would interact with our own fire or ambulance workers in an actual emergency, like a fire or an explosion? This is a serious labor and safety issue. The residential space is just one of the problems I see with this proposal. There's just too much double talk. Xinyi presents itself as a Hong Kong company. Its head office is in China. Why the deception? The numbers change all the time with this factory. In Guelph, they began with 1.6 million liters, and they changed it to 1.2, and now they only need 1 million. Why the change? Is this factory a third less of the size of the one proposed in Guelph? Xinyi, and then there's some lesser things. Xinyi is proud to say their factory roof will be ready for solar panels. My roof is ready for solar panels. This establishes nothing. I can also mention that no one on the Xinyi panel on Saturday seemed to know the direction of the prevailing winds over Stratford. We've received an MZO from the province. The MZO doesn't tell us that we must build a plant. It only says that only a glass plant will be allowed. I've spoken to city councillors who tell me that this was all a surprise and that because of the MZO, it's out of your hands. Well, I disagree. You can decide right now to change the time frame. Don't blame the province. This is on you. It's time for council to show respect for citizens and halt any voting on this project until there has been adequate public consultation. If it's such a great deal for us, what's the rush? Citizens who want to know more about this project should write to getconcernedstratford@gmail. That's all one word, getconcernedstratford@gmail. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Collingwood. Our next speaker is Larry Baswick. Mr. Baswick? Mr. Baswick, could you unmute yourself? Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor.
Good evening, Larry.
City Council, thank you for the opportunity. I've learned a lot sitting here listening to the other people. I'd like to tell people who are listening that I've made a submission to Council, and I'm going to go quickly through that submission in which I have an objection to this entire issue on a political and ethical nature. In my submission, I refer to the fact that China, through its United Front workforce, is making a not-so-veiled attempt to infiltrate Canadian infrastructure to the end of furthering intelligence gathering for the Chinese Communist Party. This is happening worldwide. Further to that, in Canadian universities, in many of Canadian universities and elsewhere around the world, groups such as the Chinese Students and Scholars Association, for instance, at McMaster University, has been decertified because of its political activities linked to, supported by, and lauded by the Chinese Communist Party. The latest at McMaster was a politically motivated interruption of free speech by Uyghur students, and they were threatened with violence. Everyone's aware of the Huawei attempts to gain control of Canada's 5G plans for development of our information systems, and please don't forget the undisputed wreckage of Nortel by Chinese informants embedded in its employee base. Beyond the political, I continue, one must wonder about the moral base of a CCP culture which has no concern for people or the environment. For instance, the two Michaels, the immoral decimation of the Amazon rainforest to plant soy to support its pork industry, re-education and sterilization of Muslims, the abhorrent harvesting of shark fin, rhino horn, tiger penis, etc., for patently useless human consumption, prevalent use of coal for energy, complete disregard for the United Kingdom and NATO agreements in Hong Kong, etc., etc. With this track record of deceit, hubris, stealing, lying, and dishonesty, and the possibility that Xinyi Glass may be part of the entire CCP dynamic, should we not exercise some caution before entering into contracts with the company? I have some questions, but just speaking to that paper, if this meeting was about any other company coming to Stratford from Europe, Uruguay, Morocco, or just about anywhere but China, I'd be enjoying happy hour rather than on the phone. But China has been on an expansionist tear for a couple of decades and has demonstrated its willingness to disregard the concerns of the Western world about its methods and brashness. So here I am trying to convince my little city of Stratford to see the red flags, the flashing lights, and hear the wail of cautioning sirens. I'd ask you to read carefully these second and third paragraphs of the transgressions of China over the past few years. This company might be a legitimate apolitical company, but consistent and repeated reports by the media cast doubt on that. As recently as last night, 60 Minutes described TikTok, a Chinese gaming company, as a threat due to China's 2017 National and Cybersecurity Act, which provides the CCP access to all data gathered by Chinese companies around the world. The concept of the Trojan horse has never been so evident in modern times. It increasingly appears that this deal is a one-way street to Beijing with no U-turns. If we go ahead, we'll be playing by definition in the big leagues, unequipped, with no exit plan, which would be seriously honored by China. The writing is on the wall, in caps. How badly do we need this company? I have a couple of questions that the council can consider and answer when they can. How many Chinese workers, possibly members of the UFWD, will be employed? Will Festival Hydro be metering the water usage? What penalties for water overusage? Will Xinyi be content to use 5G from a Canadian or European provider? And finally, has the federal government, through CSIS or other governmental agency, been involved to warn that the company and its employees are not a threat to our national security? This is the time to say no to China, and it's about time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baswick. Our next presenter is Manfred Muir.
I'm unmuted. Am I there?
Yes, you are, Manfred.
Okay. Yeah. Good evening. Thank you. I hear an echo again. I do something wrong.
Mr. Muir, Manfred, could you mute your computer?
Okay. Okay. Is this better?
No.
No. This? Do you hear me?
That's perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, good evening. Thank you for giving me the chance to speak to. As it turns out, there have been so many people before me, very eloquent, more eloquent than I can probably be. But I would like to say in general, I also think this is because of lack of information in time and lack of communication. It seems an undemocratic process to me. I have been living in Stratford for a long time, over 30 years, and I have always felt that council was there for us and working in our interest, and I feel in this situation betrayed, and I think I express this for many others that I have talked to. This is just happening too fast. So we need more time to get the information, and especially time for you, Mayor and Council, to think about this, to reflect on what you hear, your constituency. It is absolutely incredible that a project of this magnitude can be pushed on a community with all the implications, issues involved, insecurity, all these things that have been talked about, ethics, labor ethics. Is such an issue. You have to give this more time. And if you have to vote about this tomorrow, the cost sharing, if the cost sharing means the beginning of the process, I think this is a very dangerous time. And you are opening, if you agree to this project, you will open a can of worms, Pandora's box, Trojan horse, everything that comes to mind. And I have still a few more concrete issues, questions. For instance, what guarantee does the city have for the company to employ local people? Their argument will be, of course, lack of communication. If a company works in a host country, I think their business is to learn English. They should speak English, not we have to learn Mandarin. There shouldn't be an excuse to employ just Chinese people. Another question that hasn't been asked yet, would local business, construction business, employed in the construction of this huge plan, or is it all Chinese? Another point was transportation of masses of sand by train from Quebec. That means the trains will come from the east through the city, crossing Downey Street. I don't know how many a day. That will increase the congestion of local traffic. I'm not even talking about the other traffic of trucks and employees driving. That has been dealt with, I think, and touched. But anyway, it's a huge project, and we all have to think this through. If not, it seems to be short-sighted beneficiary. And what will the future be? What if this whole thing does not work out, if we cannot even guarantee enough water supply? The factory would have to close early. What happens to the factory then? Well, I'm trying to think ahead, and I think you should do, and think about it tomorrow when it comes to the vote. There are probably more points that I have forgotten, but most of it has been dealt with very eloquently. It's your turn to listen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Muir. That concludes the presentations that were put forward this afternoon by the delegations. This time, there's nothing else on our agenda except the reading of the confirmatory bylaw. Councillor Gaffney?
Did we move to hear the delegates, like the formal moving in second?
The clerk has informed me that we did not, but we have heard them, so I'll take you as a mover and Councillor Beattie as a seconder. Thank you for catching that. And Councillor Sebin?
Thank you. I just had a comment. I just had something I wanted to.
If we could, Cody, if I could just finish the vote on that. So sure. We have, yeah, all those in favor of hearing the delegations you've just heard and entering them into the record. That was carried. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Gaffney and Ms. Defoe. I appreciate that. Councillor Sebin, you have the floor.
Thank you. I just wanted to add, Council received correspondence today from John Nader, our Member of Parliament for Perth Wellington. I just wanted to read a brief excerpt from that, just as it's relevant to. So he mostly wrote to relay sort of that he has heard from many constituents on many of the issues that we've heard about tonight. And he closed the closing paragraph is I'll just read it here. It says, finally, I would be remiss if I did not highlight the ongoing concerns related to the government of China. 2 Canadian citizens, Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig, have been arbitrarily detained for over 700 days. This, combined with the continued crackdown by Beijing on pro-democracy protesters in Hong Kong, provides a need for confirmation from Xinyi executives that their corporate social responsibility statement includes a pro-democracy commitment. I just wanted to share that with everybody watching.
Thank you, Councillor Sebin. Is there any other members of council this time? If not, we have the confirmatory bylaw to confirm this afternoon's proceedings. The information that has been sent through the website from a number of the residents, along with these presentations, will form for members of council tomorrow their information to deliberate on when we discuss the cost sharing arrangement tomorrow. With that said, I'll take a motion to adjourn, or sorry, a motion to approve the confirmatory bylaw. Councillor Sebin and Councillor Clifford will move it a first and second time. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. A third and final reading. Councillor Gaffney and Councillor Henderson for the confirmatory bylaw. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, and that's carried. And a motion to adjourn. Councillor Burback and Councillor Vasilakos. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you.